They whispered that death had a sound, but for Don Lorenzo Moretti, death was absolute silence. He was the most feared man in New York, a deaf kingpin who ruled the underworld from a fortress of isolation. No one dared breathe too loud in his presence, let alone touch him. But on a rainy Tuesday, the impossible happened. A 3-year-old girl with curls like sun gold and zero fear waddled into the lion's den. She didn't just interrupt his dinner. She climbed onto his lap and did the unthinkable. What happened next didn't just break the rules. It started a war that would burn the city to the ground. The rain battered the reinforced glass of the penthouse overlooking Manhattan, but Lorenzo Moretti heard none of it. He felt it, though. He felt the rhythmic thrum of the storm vibrating against the soles of his Italian leather shoes. He felt the tension in the air, a familiar static that pricked at his skin whenever bad news was imminent. Lorenzo stood by the window, a glass of 1985 Sassicaia in his hand. At 34, he was the capo dei capi of the Moretti crime family. A fever at age 7 had taken his hearing, but in return it had given him something far more dangerous, total unyielding focus. He saw everything: the twitch of a liar's eye, the slight perspiration on a traitor's upper lip, the shift in air pressure when a gun was drawn. He turned. His consigliere Roberto was standing by the heavy oak door. Roberto's mouth was moving. The shipment from the docks was light. Boss. 2 crates missing. Lorenzo didn't need sign language. He read lips with the precision of a surgeon. He placed his wine glass on the mahogany desk. The vibration of the glass meeting the wood was a dull thud in his fingertips. He signed back his movements, sharp and fluid. "Who was on watch?" Paolo Roberto said, looking down. Lorenzo walked over to the seated man in the corner. "Paolo." The young soldier was trembling. Lorenzo could see the vibration of the man's fear. His knee was bouncing rapidly, shaking the fabric of his trousers. Lorenzo placed a hand on Paolo's shoulder. The man flinched. Lorenzo squeezed, feeling the frantic pulse in the trapezius muscle. He looked into Paolo's eyes and saw the truth instantly. It wasn't negligence. It was greed. Lorenzo sighed. He hated waste. He pulled the suppressed Beretta from his holster and ended it. 1 shot. No sound for him, just the recoil kicking back into his palm. He holstered the weapon and looked at Roberto. "Clean this up, and tell the new house staff that dinner is at 8:00 p.m. sharp. If the soup is cold, they're fired. If they disturb me, they're dead." Downstairs in the servants' quarters, Sophia Russo was trying to keep a toddler quiet with a ragged stuffed bear. "Shh, Bella, please," Sophia whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You have to be a quiet mouse. Remember the game, the quiet mouse gets the cheese." Bella, 3 years old and full of chaotic energy, giggled and threw the bear across the small, sterile room. Sophia lunged for it, her eyes darting to the door. Sophia shouldn't have been here. She had lied on her application. She used a fake last name. She claimed to be single childless and experienced. The truth was, she was Sophia Gallo, the runaway daughter of a debt-ridden gambler who had sold her off to a rival crew in Chicago to settle a score. She had fled taking nothing but the clothes on her back and her baby girl. The Moretti estate was the last place anyone would look for her. It was the lion's den, but it was also the safest place in the city, provided she remained invisible. "Mama hungry," Bella whined, tugging on Sophia's apron. "I know, baby." I know. Sophia pulled a crushed granola bar from her pocket. Eat this. Mama has to go serve the bad man his dinner. You stay here. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but Mama. Do you understand? Bella nodded, her big brown eyes wide. Bad man, very bad man, Sophia said, kissing her forehead. The king of silence. Sophia smoothed her uniform. She was terrified. The staff gossip was that Lorenzo Moretti was a monster who ate solitude for breakfast. They said he couldn't hear you scream, so he didn't care if you did. She stepped out into the hallway, the heavy tray of minestrone soup balancing on her arm. The hallway was long lined with portraits of dead men who looked just as cruel as Lorenzo. She checked her watch. 7:58 p.m. She hurried toward the dining hall. The double doors were guarded by two men who looked like they were carved from granite. They patted her down, checking for wires, weapons, or poisons. Go, one grunted. Don't look him in the eye. Place the soup. Pour the wine. Leave. Sophia nodded, her breath hitching. She pushed the doors open. The dining room was cavernous. A table long enough to seat 20 people sat in the center, bathed in the dim glow of a crystal chandelier. At the very far end, alone in the shadows, sat Lorenzo. He didn't look up. He was reading a file, his brow furrowed. Sophia walked. The click of her heels was swallowed by the thick Persian rug. She reached the table and, trembling, placed the bowl down. She reached for the wine decanter. Her hand shook. A single drop of red wine splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth. She froze. Lorenzo stopped reading. He didn't look at the stain. He looked at her hand. Then slowly his gaze traveled up her arm, past her terrified throat, and locked onto her eyes. His eyes were dark, like obsidian, intelligent, cold. He raised a hand. Sophia flinched, expecting a strike. He pointed a finger at the stain, then at the door. Get out. Sophia fled. She ran back to the kitchen, her heart racing so fast she thought she might pass out. She had survived. She leaned against the stainless steel counter, gasping for air. But in her panic, she had forgotten one thing. She hadn't heard the click of the lock on the servants' room door when she left. Lorenzo stared at the soup. It was hot. Good. The vibration of the heat rising was almost palpable. He picked up his spoon. The solitude was his sanctuary. In a world of noise, of screaming victims, lying politicians and gunfire, the silence was the only thing that was truly his. He dipped the spoon into the broth. Then he felt it. A vibration. Not the storm. Not the guards. Something lighter. An irregular staccato pattern thumping through the floorboards. Thump, thump, pause. Thump, thump. It was coming from the entrance of the dining hall. Lorenzo didn't move his head. He shifted his eyes. The heavy oak doors, which should have been closed, were cracked open about 6 inches. Through the gap, a small head poked through. Lorenzo's hand drifted toward the steak knife on the table. An assassin, a midget with a bomb. He had seen stranger things. The intruder pushed the door open. It wasn't an assassin. It was a child. A girl no older than 3, wearing a faded pink t-shirt that said princess and pajama pants covered in cartoon ducks. She was holding a raggedy brown bear by the ear. Lorenzo sat frozen. His guards were outside. How did a child get past 2 armed men? He would later learn the guards were busy flirting with the new housekeeper down the hall. The girl looked around the massive room, her mouth forming an O of wonder. She spotted him. Most people, when they saw Lorenzo Moretti, saw death. They saw the scar running down his jawline. They saw the coldness. This child saw something else. She saw the breadbasket. She began to waddle toward him. Lorenzo gripped the knife tighter. He should call the guards. He should ring the bell. This was a security breach. This was unacceptable. But he didn't move. He was paralyzed by the sheer absurdity of the moment. The girl reached the table. It was high way above her head. She stood on her tiptoes, trying to see the top. She couldn't reach. She looked at Lorenzo, frustrated. She waved her hand. "Up," she demanded. Lorenzo couldn't hear her, but he read the lips perfectly. "Up." He stared at her. She stared back, defiant. She smacked the leg of his chair. The vibration traveled up his spine. Up Lorenzo Moretti. The man who had dissolved a rival boss in a vat of acid last summer felt a strange sensation in his chest. Curiosity. He slowly, carefully put the knife down. He turned his chair slightly. The girl didn't wait for an invitation. She grabbed the fabric of his expensive suit pants and began to climb. She used his knee as a step, his belt buckle as a handle. Lorenzo held his breath. He instinctively put a hand out, not to push her away, but to catch her as she slipped. She regained her footing and scrambled onto his lap. She sat there settled in and looked at his plate. She pointed a chubby finger at a breadstick. Lorenzo looked at the breadstick. He looked at the girl. He picked it up and handed it to her. She snatched it and took a massive bite, crumbs falling onto his black silk shirt. She chewed happily, swinging her legs. Then she stopped. She looked up at him. She noticed the device behind his ear, his cochlear implant, which he rarely turned on, because the digital noise gave him migraines. She reached out. Lorenzo flinched. No one touched him. No one. Her small, sticky hand touched his cheek. She traced the white scar on his jawline. Her fingers were impossibly soft, warm. She said something. He read the lips. Boo-boo. Lorenzo blinked. A boo-boo. She thought his scar was a boo-boo. She leaned forward and did something that made Lorenzo's blood turn to ice, then instantly boil. She kissed the scar. A wet, sloppy toddler kiss. All better, she said. For the first time in 20 years, the silence in Lorenzo's head wasn't empty. It was full. It was loud. It was thundering with the sound of his own heart. He looked at this tiny creature. She was fragile. A single squeeze of his hand could crush her. And yet she had disarmed him more effectively than any army. He reached for a grape from the fruit bowl. He held it out. She smiled a toothy, brilliant grin and ate it from his fingers. Suddenly the dining room doors burst open. Sophia stood there, pale as a ghost, her chest heaving. She saw the empty hallway, the open doors, and she knew her life was over. She ran in, skidding to a halt when she saw the scene. The monster, the deaf Don, with her daughter on his lap. Sophia let out a strangled cry. She fell to her knees, bowing her head to the floor. "Please," she sobbed, though she knew he couldn't hear. "Please don't kill her. Kill me. She's just a baby. It's my fault. Please, Don Moretti." Lorenzo looked up from the child. His face hardened instantly. The mask was back. He saw the woman on the floor, the new maid, the one who spilled the wine. Bella, sensing the distress, stopped chewing. She looked at her mother, then at Lorenzo. She pointed the half-eaten breadstick at Sofia. Mama said she told Lorenzo. Lorenzo looked at the child, then at the mother. He stood up, lifting Bella with one arm as easily as if she were a feather. Sofia squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the gunshot. Instead, she felt a vibration on the floor. Heavy steps approaching. She looked up. Lorenzo was towering over her. He held Bella out. Sofia snatched her daughter, clutching her to her chest, sobbing uncontrollably. Lorenzo watched them. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp white handkerchief. He dropped it onto Sofia's weeping face. Then he signed his movements, sharp, angry, but restrained. Sofia stared, confused. She didn't know sign language. Lorenzo realized this. He huffed, annoyed. He grabbed a napkin and a fountain pen from the table. He scribbled something down and threw the napkin at her. He turned his back and walked to the window, staring out at the rain. Sofia picked up the napkin with trembling fingers. The handwriting was elegant, jagged. She likes grapes. Buy the seedless kind next time. If I find her wandering again, I will fire the guards. Get out! Sofia scrambled to her feet, clutching Bella, and ran. Lorenzo watched their reflection in the window glass as they fled. He touched his jaw right where the sticky kiss had landed. The silence returned. But for the first time, it felt lonely. Lorenzo Moretti did not sleep that night. Instead, he sat in his study, surrounded by the blue hum of server racks and monitors. The silence here was different. It was electric, buzzing with data. He replayed the security footage from the dining room for the 50th time. On the screen, the grainy image of the child Bella climbing onto his lap played out. He paused it at the moment her hand touched his face. He touched his own jaw, frowning. He wasn't a man prone to sentimentality. Sentimentality got you killed. But curiosity was a survival trait. He opened a secure terminal. He typed in the name the maid had given Sofia Russo. The results were clean. Too clean. No credit history before 2021. No hospital records for the birth of a child. A social security number that upon deeper inspection belonged to a deceased woman from Ohio. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. He typed in a new command, engaging a facial recognition algorithm that the Moretti family had purchased from a corrupt NSA contractor. He cropped a still image of Sofia's face from the hallway camera and hit enter. It took 3 minutes. A new profile popped up. Name Sofia Gallo. Father Antonio Tony 2 times Gallo. Chicago outfit associate. Status missing. Presumed dead or fled. Notes: Antonio Gallo stole $500,000 from the Vitti crime family. Debt inherited by next of kin upon his execution 3 months ago. Lorenzo leaned back the leather chair, groaning a vibration he felt against his spine. She wasn't just a maid. She was a marked woman. The Vitti family, led by the sadistic Luca Vitti, didn't forgive debts. If they found her, they would kill her. And they would sell the girl to recoup the losses. Lorenzo looked at the ceiling. By keeping her here, he was inviting a war with Chicago. The logical strategic move was to hand her over. It would build goodwill with Vitti. It was just business. He reached for the phone to call Roberto. He would order her removal. But before he could pick up the receiver, the image on the screen caught his eye again. The toddler. The boo-boo. Lorenzo slowly pulled his hand back. He didn't call Roberto. Instead, he typed a message to his head of security, a mute giant named Kael. Triple the perimeter guard. Monitor all incoming communications to the estate. If anyone asks about a woman and child, they don't exist. Meanwhile, across the city, in a dimly lit strip club in Queens, the bass thumped so hard it rattled the teeth of everyone inside. Everyone, that is, except Stefano Moretti. Lorenzo's younger brother was everything Lorenzo was not. Loud, brash, and reckless. He sat in a VIP booth, snorting a line of white powder off a glass table. "He's losing it, I tell you," Stefano shouted over the music to his companion, a corrupt NYPD detective named Miller. "My brother, the genius, he's going soft." Miller took a sip of whiskey. Lorenzo Soft, the guy who cut a man's tongue out for interrupting a meeting. That was 5 years ago. Stefano slammed his hand on the table. Today he let a maid interrupt his dinner. A maid and her brat. My guys at the house told me. The kid climbed on him. And he didn't shoot them. He gave the kid a grape. Stefano laughed a harsh barking sound. A grape? Can you believe it? The wolf is becoming a domestic dog. And you know what happens to dogs in this city? Miller shook his head. They get put down. Stefano leaned in close, his eyes manic. I did some digging on the new girl. Turns out she's got baggage. Chicago baggage. If Luca Vitti knew she was hiding in the Moretti penthouse, well, he'd come door knocking. And if a war starts, and Lorenzo is too busy playing daddy to fight back, the family is going to need a new Don. Stefano pulled out a burner phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found a number with a 312 area code. Chicago. Don't do it, Stefano, Miller warned. Lorenzo will know. Lorenzo can't hear a freight train coming, Stefano sneered. He won't hear this. He hit send on a text message. It contained a single photo, a blurry shot of Sofia walking into the Moretti estate service entrance taken by one of Stefano's spies. The caption read, "Found your lost sheep. 880 Park Avenue." 2 days later, the silence of the penthouse was shattered. It was a Thursday afternoon. Sofia was in the laundry room folding Lorenzo's shirts. She handled them with reverence. The silk was cool to the touch. She hadn't seen him since the dining room incident. She had stayed invisible, keeping Bella locked in their room with a stack of coloring books she'd stolen from the recycling bin. Suddenly the fire alarm blared. Sofia froze. The flashing strobes bounced off the white tiles. She dropped the shirt and ran toward the servants' quarters. "Bella!" She burst into the hallway. It was chaos. Smoke was filling the air, acrid black smoke that smelled like burning rubber. But it wasn't a fire. It was a distraction. Through the smoke she saw 2 men. They weren't Moretti guards. They wore ski masks and tactical vests. They were moving with precision, checking rooms. "Check the back," one shouted. "Vitti wants the girl alive." Sofia's blood ran cold. Vitti, they had found her. She turned and sprinted the other way toward the service elevator. She needed to get to Bella. She scrambled into her room. Bella was sitting on the bed, hands over her ears, crying. "Mama, come here." Sofia grabbed her, not bothering with shoes or jackets. She scooped the child up and ran back into the hall. The 2 men were there. They blocked the exit. "Going somewhere, princess," the taller one sneered. He raised a suppressed pistol. "Hand over the kid. You come with us. Boss wants a word about your dad's debt." Sofia backed away, clutching Bella so tight the child whimpered. "Please," she begged. "Take me. Leave her." "Package deal." The man stepped forward. Sophia looked around for a weapon. Nothing but a vase on a side table. She grabbed it, ready to fight, ready to die. The man laughed. Cute. He reached for her. Crack. The man's head snapped back. A spray of red mist coated the floral wallpaper. He crumbled to the floor. Standing behind him, emerging from the smoke like a phantom, was Lorenzo. He wore a charcoal suit, immaculate as always. In his hand was a custom Sig Sauer P-126. His face was a mask of terrifying indifference. He didn't look at the dead man. He looked at the second intruder. The second man panicked. He raised his submachine gun. Lorenzo didn't wait. He didn't shout. He didn't negotiate. He moved with a speed that defied physics. He stepped inside the man's guard, trapped the gun barrel with his left hand, and drove the palm of his right hand into the man's nose. Bone crunched. The man screamed, dropping the gun. Lorenzo spun him around, putting him in a chokehold. He looked at Sophia. His eyes were furious. He motioned with his head. Go to my office. Sophia was frozen. Lorenzo tightened his grip. The intruder flailed, clawing at Lorenzo's arm, but the Don was immovable. He stared at Sophia until she moved. Go! She whispered to herself, sprinting past the violence shielding Bella's eyes. She ran down the hall up the grand staircase and into Lorenzo's private study at the top of the house. She slammed the heavy reinforced door and locked it. Downstairs, Lorenzo finished it. He dropped the unconscious man and adjusted his cufflinks. He felt the vibration of footsteps, heavy running. His own guards finally responding. Roberto burst through the smoke, followed by Kael. They stopped seeing the bodies. Lorenzo signed his movements sharp and violent. How did they get in? Roberto looked pale. Service elevator. Someone disabled the mag locks from the inside. Inside job, Lorenzo signed. Find out who. Torture them. Then kill them. Clean this up. Lorenzo stepped over the body and walked toward the stairs. His heart was hammering, but not from fear. It was rage. Pure, white-hot rage. Someone had brought violence into his home. Someone had threatened the only thing that had made him smile in 20 years. He walked up the stairs to his office. He used his thumbprint to unlock the door. Inside, Sophia was huddled behind his massive desk, holding a letter opener in one hand and Bella in the other. When she saw him, she dropped the blade and collapsed, sobbing. Lorenzo walked over. He knelt down. This time, he didn't care about the suit. He didn't care about the rules. He reached out and took the weapon from her hand. He holstered his own gun. Bella was shaking. She looked at Lorenzo, her eyes wide with terror. Lorenzo hesitated. Then he did something he had never done. He sat on the floor, cross-legged, right there on the expensive Persian rug. He tapped Bella's knee. She looked at him. He brought his hands up. He made a fist, then extended his pinky and thumb, wiggling them. Then he pointed to her. Play. He pulled a gold coin from his pocket and made it vanish, then reappear behind her ear. Bella blinked. She sniffled. Then a small, watery giggle escaped her. Sophia watched, tears streaming down her face. She looked at this deadly man, this killer who had just executed 2 hitmen, now doing magic tricks to stop her daughter from crying. Lorenzo looked up at Sophia. His eyes were intense. He signed, hoping she would understand the intent, if not the words. He pointed to the floor. Here. He pointed to himself. Me. He made a roof shape with his hands. You stay here. With me. Sophia understood. There was nowhere else to go. The world outside wanted them dead. The only safety was in the silence of the monster's den. She nodded. Lorenzo stood up. He walked to his desk and hit a button that sealed the blast shutters over the windows. The room plunged into artificial twilight. He wasn't just a Don anymore. He was a guardian. And God help anyone, Vitti Stefano, or the devil himself, who tried to cross that threshold again. 3 weeks. That was how long Sophia and Bella had been prisoners in the penthouse. It was a prison of velvet and gold, but a prison nonetheless. Outside, the city was bracing for a mob war. The Chicago incident, as the papers called the botched hit at the Moretti estate, had sent ripples through the underworld. But inside the blast-proof walls, time seemed to warp. Lorenzo had cleared the entire East Wing for them. He had bought Bella toys, ridiculous expensive toys like a hand-carved rocking horse and a dollhouse that was historically accurate to the Victorian era. But Bella preferred the cardboard boxes they came in. Sophia spent her days trying to make herself useful, though the staff had been ordered not to let her lift a finger. So she studied. She sat in the library, a massive book on American Sign Language open on her lap. She practiced the movements, her fingers clumsy and slow. Thank you. Hungry. Danger. Safe. It was late on a Tuesday. The house was asleep. Sophia was practicing the sign for music, a rhythmic sweeping of the hand, when she felt a presence. She looked up. Lorenzo was leaning against the doorframe. He was in his shirt sleeves, his tie undone, looking exhausted. The dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights, managing the fallout of the attack. He watched her hands. A flicker of amusement crossed his face. He walked over the scent of sandalwood and expensive scotch trailing him. He tapped the book, then her hand. He signed, "You're doing it wrong." Sophia flushed. She didn't understand the specific signs, but the context was clear. Lorenzo sighed. He reached out. His large, calloused hands engulfed hers. His skin was warm, electric. He molded her fingers into the correct position. Music, he signed, guiding her hand in a fluid motion. Sophia's breath hitched. He was so close she could see the flecks of gold in his obsidian eyes. She looked up at him, and for a moment the dangerous Don Moretti was gone. There was just a man who lived in silence, reaching out to be understood. She pulled her hand back gently and signed, shaky but correct. "Thank you." Lorenzo stared at her. He moved his hands slower this time. "Why are you learning?" Sophia reached for the notepad she kept nearby. She wrote, "Because you saved us, and because silence is lonely." Lorenzo read the note. His expression didn't change, but his shoulders lost some of their tension. He took the pen from her. "Silence is safe," he wrote back. "Noise is where the lies are." Suddenly a small blur raced into the room. Bella escaping her bedtime again. She was wearing only one sock and holding a half-eaten cracker. She ran straight to Lorenzo and wrapped her arms around his leg. "Renzo," she shrieked. It was her version of his name. Lorenzo looked down. He couldn't hear the name, but he felt the impact. He peeled her off his leg and lifted her up. She immediately began patting his cheeks, looking for the boo-boo scar. She signed, clumsily mimicking what she had seen Sophia do. "Eat." Lorenzo laughed. It was a rusty sound, low and deep, like an engine turning over after years of disuse. He looked at Sophia. "She learns faster than you," he signed. Sophia smiled, a genuine, warm smile that made Lorenzo's chest ache. In that moment, the lines blurred. They weren't master and servant or protector and victim. They were a strange, broken little family unit, forged in the fires of danger. But the bubble had to burst. The next morning, Roberto stormed into the library, his face grim. He didn't look at Sophia. He marched straight to Lorenzo and began signing rapidly, aggressively. "Stefano is making moves. He's called a meeting with the commission. He claims you're compromised. He claims you're keeping a spy in the house." Lorenzo's face turned to stone. He looked at Sophia, then back to Roberto. "Let him talk." Lorenzo signed back. "We are going to the winter solstice gala on Saturday." Roberto's eyes widened. "Boss, that's suicide. It's open ground. Vitti will be there. Stefano will be there." "Exactly." Lorenzo signed his movements sharp as knife strikes. "I'm done hiding. I'm going to show them exactly who runs this city." He turned to Sophia. He looked her up and down, his gaze clinical yet heated. He wrote on the notepad, "Get a dress, a red one. You're coming with me." Sophia stared at him. "What, no? I can't. I'm a maid." Lorenzo didn't hear her protest, but he saw the fear. He stepped close, crowding her space, radiating power. He tipped her chin up with his finger, so she had to look him in the eye. He spoke, his voice rough and unused, the consonants slightly slurred, but the tone commanding. "Not a maid," he rasped, the sound sending shivers down her spine. "Mine." The Grand Metropolitan Hotel was a palace of crystal and marble, tonight filled with the most dangerous people in America. The air smelled of expensive perfume, gunpowder, and fear. The winter solstice gala was neutral ground. No weapons allowed. A rule everyone respected and everyone broke. Lorenzo Moretti entered the ballroom, and the music didn't stop, but the conversation died. He wore a tuxedo that cost more than most people's houses, tailored to conceal the ceramic knife strapped to his ankle and the slim Kevlar vest beneath his shirt. But no one was looking at Lorenzo. They were looking at the woman on his arm. Sophia Russo wore a gown of crimson silk that hugged every curve, spilling onto the floor like a pool of blood. Her hair was swept up, revealing the diamond necklace that Lorenzo had fastened around her neck an hour ago. She looked like a queen. She felt like a target. Lorenzo's hand was firm on the small of her back. He guided her through the crowd. He couldn't hear the whispers, but he saw them. "Who is she?" "That's the Chicago girl." "Is he insane?" "Bringing her here." Lorenzo scanned the room. His visual processing was in overdrive. He tracked the waiters, the exits, the reflection in the champagne glasses. He saw Stefano by the bar holding a martini, sweating. Stefano looked at Lorenzo, then at Sophia. He smiled a greasy, nervous smile. And then Lorenzo saw him. Luca Vitti, the butcher of Chicago. Vitti was a large man, with a face like a bulldog. He was holding court near the orchestra. When he saw Sophia, his eyes went flat. Dead. He began to walk toward them. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Sophia's grip on Lorenzo's arm tightened. "He's coming," she whispered, her voice trembling. Lorenzo didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Vitti. He felt the vibration of Vitti's heavy footsteps through the floorboards. Vitti stopped 3 feet away. He ignored Lorenzo completely. He looked at Sofia. "Sofia Gallo," Vitti said, his voice booming. "You look expensive. Your father died owing me a lot of money. I guess you found a new sugar daddy to pay the tab." Sofia couldn't breathe. Lorenzo stepped in front of her. He blocked Vitti's view. Vitti sneered. He began to sign his movements mocking and crude. "Move, cripple. This doesn't concern you." The insult was flagrant. The room gasped. To call the Don a cripple was a death sentence. Lorenzo didn't blink. He watched Vitti's hands. He smiled a cold, terrifying smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lorenzo signed back his movements, elegant, precise, and fast. "Her name is Sofia Moretti. She is under my protection. The debt is cancelled. If you speak to her again, I will cut off your hands and feed them to you." Sofia Moretti. He had given her his name. It was a lie, a cover, but the weight of it hit the room like a bomb. Vitti's face turned purple. "You think you can take her? You think you can steal from me?" Vitti lunged. It happened in slow motion for Lorenzo. He saw the shift in Vitti's weight. He saw the glint of the razor blade Vitti had hidden in his cuff. Lorenzo didn't retreat. He sidestepped, grabbed Vitti's wrist and twisted. Snap! The sound of the wrist breaking was loud enough to be heard over the string quartet. Vitti screamed, dropping to his knees. Security swarmed. Chaos erupted. "Get them out!" Stefano shouted, pointing at Lorenzo, seizing the moment. "He broke the truce. He attacked a guest. Get him!" It was a setup. Stefano had goaded Vitti, knowing Lorenzo would react, giving Stefano the excuse to use the neutral ground security, who were on Stefano's payroll, to take Lorenzo down. Lorenzo felt the shift in the air pressure, the rush of bodies. He grabbed Sofia's hand. "Run!" They sprinted toward the kitchen exit. 5 guards intercepted them. Lorenzo didn't stop. He fought with a brutality that was terrifying to behold. He used his elbows, his knees, the environment. He smashed a champagne bottle over a guard's head, the vibration shuddering up his arm. Sofia wasn't helpless. She kicked a guard in the shin with her stiletto heel, buying Lorenzo a second to land a knockout punch. They burst into the kitchen. Steam and shouting cooks. They ran for the loading dock. "The car is round back," Sofia yelled, then remembered to tap his shoulder and point. They burst out into the cool night air of the alleyway. Lorenzo's armored SUV was there. But so was Stefano. Stefano stood by the car, holding a gun to the head of the driver. He turned the gun on Lorenzo. "End of the road, big brother!" Stefano shouted, tears of rage and drugs in his eyes. "You should have just given me the chair. You and your silence. You think you're a god. You're just a broken machine." Lorenzo stood still, shielding Sofia. He watched his brother's lips. He saw the madness. "Stefano!" Sofia cried out. "Don't! Shut up, bitch!" Stefano cocked the hammer. "This is business." Lorenzo looked at Stefano. He didn't sign. He didn't move. He just stared with a look of profound disappointment. Then the lights went out. All of them. The street lights, the alley lights, the hotel lights. Total darkness. Stefano panicked. "What? Who cut the power?" He waved the gun wildly. For Stefano, the darkness was blinding. He was disoriented. He relied on his eyes. For Lorenzo, the darkness changed nothing. He didn't need light to know where his brother was. He could smell the fear. He could feel the vibration of Stefano's shuffling feet on the asphalt. Lorenzo moved. He was a shadow within a shadow, silent, deadly. Stefano fired a shot blindly into the dark. Bang! The flash illuminated the alley for a microsecond. In that flash, Sofia saw Lorenzo. He was already in the air. He tackled Stefano. The gun clattered away. Lorenzo didn't kill him. That would be too easy. He broke Stefano's arm, pinned him to the ground, and pressed his thumb into the pressure point behind Stefano's ear. Stefano passed out cold. The emergency lights flickered on, bathing the alley in an eerie red glow. Lorenzo stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. He looked down at his unconscious brother. He turned to Sofia. She was shaking, pressed against the brick wall. Lorenzo walked to her. He checked her for injuries, his hands roaming over her arms, her face. He found no blood. He exhaled a long, shuddering breath. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Kael Asset, secured. "Clean up the alley. Put Stefano in the basement cell. We are going home." He showed the screen to Sofia. She looked at him, her eyes wide. "You cut the power." Lorenzo shook his head. He pointed to the roof of the adjacent building. Sofia looked up. A small figure was waving. It was a tech specialist from Lorenzo's crew, holding a tablet. Lorenzo had planned this. He knew it was a trap. He had trapped the trappers. Lorenzo opened the car door for her. As she slid in, he grabbed her hand. He didn't use a notepad. He signed one simple word he had been practicing in the mirror for a week. Safe. Sofia nodded, tears spilling onto the red silk. Safe. But as the car sped away into the night, Lorenzo checked the rear-view mirror. He saw something that made his blood run cold again. Vitti hadn't been stopped by the broken wrist. He was standing at the back door of the hotel, watching the car leave. And he was on the phone. And for the first time, Lorenzo wished he could hear, because he needed to know who was on the other end of that line. The penthouse was silent, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a held breath before the scream. Lorenzo stood in the basement interrogation room. Stefano was tied to a steel chair, his arm in a splint, his face bruised. He was laughing, a wet, manic sound. Lorenzo watched his brother's mouth. "You don't get it, do you?" Stefano spat blood onto the concrete floor. "You think I'm the only one? You think I have the brains to pull off the hotel ambush alone?" Lorenzo stepped closer. He signed to Kael, who stood by the door with a crowbar. "Make him talk." Stefano shook his head. "No need for the caveman stuff, I'll tell you, because it's already too late. I was the distraction, brother. I was the bait in the alley." Lorenzo frowned. A cold dread settled in his stomach. "Who?" Lorenzo signed his gestures sharp. Stefano grinned. "Who speaks for you, Lorenzo? Who hears the whispers you can't? Who made the deal with Vitti to split the territory once you were out of the way?" Lorenzo froze. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Roberto, his consigliere, his voice, the man who had been his ears for 15 years. Lorenzo spun around, running for the stairs. He had left Sofia and Bella in the library, with Roberto guarding the door. Upstairs, the library door was locked. Sofia sat on the leather sofa reading a story to Bella. She felt safe here. Lorenzo had said they were safe. The door clicked open. Sofia looked up, expecting Lorenzo. Instead, Roberto walked in. He held a suppressed pistol in his right hand. Behind him walked Luca Vitti, nursing his broken wrist. His face twisted in a mask of pure hate. "Hello, sweetheart," Vitti sneered. Sofia dropped the book. She grabbed Bella and pulled her behind the sofa. "Roberto, what are you doing?" Roberto looked sad. genuinely sad. "Business, Sophia. It's just business. Lorenzo, he's a relic. He can't hear the world changing. We need a leader who listens." "He trusted you," Sophia screamed. "And that was his mistake." Roberto raised the gun. "Vitti wants the girl. You unfortunately are loose ends." Bella began to cry a high-pitched wail. Suddenly the lights in the library flickered. Vitti looked up. "What the hell, I thought you cut the security lines." "I did," Roberto said, nervous now. The floorboards began to vibrate, a low thrumming hum that grew in intensity. Then a high-pitched shriek erupted from the hidden speakers in the walls. It was a sonic suppression system, a prototype military defense mechanism Lorenzo had installed for worst-case scenarios. It emitted a frequency of 18,000 hertz at 130 decibels. To a normal human, it felt like an ice pick being driven into the eardrum. It caused instant vertigo, nausea, and blinding pain. Roberto dropped the gun, clutching his ears, screaming. Vitti fell to his knees, retching blood trickling from his nose. Sophia screamed too, clamping her hands over her ears. Bella buried her head in the sofa cushions, wailing. The door burst open. Lorenzo walked in. He walked with a calm, predatory grace. He heard nothing. The sonic weapon was screaming at a pitch that shattered glass. But to the deaf Don, the room was as silent as a tomb. He saw his enemies on the floor, writhing in agony. He didn't hesitate. He walked up to Roberto. The consigliere looked up, eyes bloodshot, begging. He tried to speak, but the sound was drowned out by the siren. Lorenzo looked at him with zero emotion. He didn't sign goodbye. He simply raised his boot and kicked Roberto in the temple. The traitor collapsed unconscious or dead. It didn't matter. Vitti was tougher. He was crawling toward the dropped gun. Lorenzo stepped on Vitti's hand, the broken one. Vitti's mouth opened in a silent scream. Lorenzo kicked the gun away. He reached down, grabbed Vitti by the throat, and lifted him. Lorenzo turned to the wall panel and punched a code. The sonic siren cut off instantly. The silence rushed back in, heavy and ringing. Sophia was gasping for air, clutching Bella. Her ears were ringing, her balance shot. She looked up and saw Lorenzo holding Vitti against the bookshelf. Vitti gasped, blood bubbling on his lips. "You freak!" Lorenzo couldn't hear him. He didn't need to. He pulled the ceramic knife from his ankle holster. He looked at Sophia. He waited until her eyes met his. He wanted her to see this, not to scare her, but to show her that the monster was useful, that the monster could protect her. One fluid motion. It was over. Lorenzo dropped Vitti's body. He wiped the blade on a first-edition copy of Dante's Inferno. He turned to Vermontold to them. Sophia was trembling. She looked at the bodies, then at him. Lorenzo felt a spike of fear. Had he gone too far? Had he terrified them so much they would run? He stood there, covered in the invisible dust of violence, waiting for her judgment. Bella moved first. She wiggled out of Sophia's grip. She stepped over the expensive rug, avoiding the glass. She walked up to Lorenzo. She tugged on his pant leg. Lorenzo looked down. Bella pointed to his ear. Then she pointed to her own ear. She frowned. She signed her small fingers, forming the shape he had taught her just yesterday. Loud. Lorenzo let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He dropped to his knees. He signed back. Sorry. No more loud. Bella nodded, accepting the apology. Then she leaned forward and kissed his forehead. Sophia stood up. Her legs were shaky, but she walked to them. She looked at the carnage, then at the man kneeling before her daughter. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She knelt down beside him. She took his blood-stained hand in hers. She signed, slow and deliberate. Family. Lorenzo stared at her. He squeezed her hand. For the first time in his life, the silence wasn't a void. It was a promise. The dinner table was set for 3. The storm outside was raging again, rain lashing against the glass of the penthouse, but inside the atmosphere was warm. Lorenzo sat at the head of the table. He was reading a report Stefano was serving life in a federal supermax, having turned state's evidence on the Chicago families to avoid the electric chair. The Moretti family was secure. But Lorenzo wasn't focused on the report. He was focused on the vibration of the table. Thump, thump, thump. Bella, now almost 4, was banging her spoon on the wood. Bella, stop that. Sophia chided gently, placing a bowl of pasta in front of her. Bella grinned. She looked at Lorenzo. She waved to get his attention. Lorenzo put the paper down. Bella signed. Dad. Pass the cheese. Dad. She had started using that sign a month ago. Every time she did, Lorenzo felt a strange tightness in his chest, a good kind of pain. He picked up the Parmesan grater. He stood up and walked over to her. He grated an absurd amount of cheese onto her pasta until it was a snowy mountain. Bella clapped silently. Lorenzo looked at Sophia. She was smiling, her eyes crinkling at the corners. She wore a simple ring on her finger. Not a diamond, but a band of black titanium, strong and unbreakable. Lorenzo sat back down. He poured himself a glass of wine. He looked at his world. They said the Mafia was a life of blood and noise. They said a deaf man could never rule it. They said a maid could never be a queen. Lorenzo raised his glass. He couldn't hear the rain. He couldn't hear the city. He couldn't hear the music playing softly in the background. But as he watched Bella laugh and Sophia smile, he realized something. He didn't need to hear the music to know the song. He took a sip of wine. The soup was hot. The bread was fresh. And for the first time in 34 years, Lorenzo Moretti was not dining alone. And that, my friends, is the story of Lorenzo Moretti, the King of Silence, who found his voice in the most unexpected way. It's a reminder that sometimes the people society writes off as broken are actually the strongest ones in the room. Lorenzo used his deafness not as a weakness, but as the ultimate weapon to protect the ones he loved. I want to know what you think. Did you suspect Roberto was the traitor? Or did you think it was the brother all along? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, redemption, and Mafia justice, please shatter that like button. Don't worry, it won't hurt your ears like Lorenzo's sonic trap. Make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.